Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is constantly exploring the latest advancements in sports analytics and using data to uncover hidden insights, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. I'm Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 379 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I catch up with Kristen Eckhardt, the Chief Marketing Officer at the Port Adelaide Football Club. You might be listening at Sports Geek HQ, or you could be listening on your favourite podcast platform. And thank you very much if you've left a review. We've got over 100 podcast reviews from around the world at Apple Podcasts. So if you can leave a review, we would really appreciate it, but it's much better if you actually send a link to a mate or a friend that you think should be listening to the episode. Don't forget, you can please follow or stalk us on all the social media platforms. Just look for Sports Geek on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You can reach me at Sean Callanan on most social media platforms, or you can reach me via email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Please enjoy my chat with Kristen as she shares her story coming from the world of arts and into the world of sport, now CMO at the Port Adelaide Football Club. Very happy to welcome Kristen Eckhardt. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at the Port Adelaide Football Club. Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Great to be here.
Really do appreciate it. Normally I start with asking people how you got your start in sports. I know where you got your start in sports, so I actually want to go back a little bit further and sort of dive into your career, because you're still relatively new to the world of sports with the Port Adelaide Football Club, but you've come from the world of arts. What were some of your key, early jobs in the world of the arts that sort of led you down that path?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think, Sean, we may have met way back in the day when you gave a conference at an arts collaboration. Yeah,
we'll get into that. That was okay. Me definitely being a fish out of water, but and that is how we met. But yeah, you started working in the arts in different marketing roles.
Yeah, that's right. So originally from Brisbane, it started in ad agency world back in the day. In my early 20s, did the London thing and went over there for a couple of years, again, some ad agency land. But then rather than go back to Brisbane, I landed in wonderful Melbourne and got my first job in the arts at the National Gallery of Victoria. I started there as a marketing coordinator back in the day, and 8 years later I left as a marketing manager. So that really gave me a really great foundation in working in arts marketing. And I think, like any industry, much like the sporting industry, you find yourself almost a little bit pigeonholed sometimes, being the sports marketer or the arts marketer. So after the NGV, I headed over to ACME, Australian Centre for the Moving Image, and then Arts Centre Melbourne. So I'm now in Adelaide, obviously. So how I landed in Adelaide, I was actually approached from an ex-boss of mine, mentor, who thought I might be interested in a job as Director of Marketing and Comms at Adelaide Festival Centre. So being quite similar business to Arts Centre Melbourne, I said to my partner at the time, let's do this Adelaide experiment on a 3-year executive contract. And 6 years later, we're still in Adelaide and loving it. And so while I was still at the Festival Centre, I actually got approached by a recruiter who obviously saw the similarities between art and sport.
So I want to stop there because I want to stay in the arts, because you're right. That's how we did meet. And a friend of mine, Steve Sammartino, a keynote speaker, passed me on and said, "Oh, you want a different look at the arts? Go talk to a sports geek." And so, yeah, I met you when I was spoke at the marketing of the arts and was talking about tribes and sport and how they were similar and how they were different. But what I wanted to is sort of dive in on, the marketing for the Arts Centre, also being at ACME, NGV being a pillar of the art scene in Melbourne, but also Australia. There is similarities to when I talk to stadium people in bringing in content but it's just, different content. What were some of the key, planks or opportunities and challenges in that space when you've got to bring in, new shows, new exhibits, those kind of things, but also you had that concept of members and people who are just as passionate the arts as you're seeing in sports. What were some of the, key things in the arts?
Yeah, it's interesting. The arts is not just this big mass, I suppose. So even coming from a gallery environment to a performing arts environment, coming from a gallery environment, it's a lot about brand, how you present your brand, because of course you want people to come to paid exhibitions, but it's also important that they come to free shows as well. So it's really just about building up a strong brand that people want to visit as a tourist or as a way to spend their leisure time. That's opposed to the performing arts, which is much similar to sport in the sense that you're about bums on seats, right? You're about getting as many people through the door as you possibly can, as many members as you possibly can, and it's really about using all of those important tactics for ticket sales, for memberships, and brand certainly plays an absolute role, but where we spend our money is slightly different. So we do much more conversion marketing in the performing arts like we do for sport.
And so, like you said, there is a tendency in the marketing space to be pigeonholed into the industry you're in, whether it's sport, which is very wide, sport at league level, and sport with athletes and sport at club is very different in the same way you said, you're either in performing arts or you're in museums or those kind of, like, it's very broad. But people do get pigeonholed, whether they're in finance or sport or arts. Going from arts to sport, what were some of the things that were similar, and what are some of the things that were, mind-blowing and saying, oh, that's completely different, I've never seen it tackled that way, when you first stepped into the role as CMO of Port Adelaide?
Yeah, look, I've been really blown away by the similarities rather than the differences, and I guess not necessarily growing up with sport in my life. I think I was really surprised. I think, in the arts, sometimes we can take ourselves a little bit too seriously. I feel like I spent 20 years trying to convince people that art can really change your life, and I still absolutely believe that. But I think something that comes along with that is it can sometimes be dismissive of other experiences. And I've got to say, after selling arts experiences for as long as I did, it really took me going to Port Adelaide Football Club home game, standing up with 40,000 people in a stadium, holding up my scarf to never tear us apart, to really get it. And I'm not just saying that because I work there. It was absolutely a profound experience. And as I said, I think trying to describe that feeling feels much easier in the arts because that's what you expect. You don't necessarily expect that in a sporting environment. But what a way to invite fans into our brand. And for anybody who hasn't come to a Port Adelaide home game, I totally encourage it. It's a moving experience and a way to bring communities together. So in terms of similarities, the ability of sport to connect people is very similar to how art can connect people as well. So that's a very clear similarity. Like the arts, sports has its own language, its own rituals. There are lots of things, and I've been at Port now for about a year and a half, and I still learn new things every single day. But I think the advantage of me being new to sport is that I'm not necessarily my demographic, but new fans are what we want, right? So I'm able to go in and say, so just a very, very small thing that I did when I first started. I'd obviously had the fan experience. I was connected with the brand, next logical step, or the next logical step that we want to push people towards, is membership. So I went on our website, and it's just like, I don't understand this. I don't understand what this is offering me as a first-time potential buyer. So just a small tweak that we did. We were on Ticketmaster, which of course is like a white-labelled, fairly generic offering. We just basically got a microsite, which is much more customer-focused. It became more of a shop front. So just doing simple things like putting in filters for people to understand what the different membership offers were, a help me choose functionality, just really small things that I think really sort of rusted on fans and members don't think twice about, because why would you? You understand the language. So being a first-timer has really helped me, I think, introduce new ideas about how to introduce people to this wonderful brand. And
was it also a part that, you are completely new, fresh set of eyes? Like, a lot of the time it is a case of that's the site. Our fans know that's the site. They know, and it's like no one has ever, there's a lot of resource stretch, and people don't have the time to go and review something and say, hey, what does it look like? But you're coming from a, conversion focused, bums on seats, following the funnel down, tracking everything. So it would have been something that you really focused hard on every time there was a new show or a new exhibition coming through. It's like, well, how do we do that? And because you had the variety of content coming through, you got to do it multiple times. But when you're at a club, that it's the same product every year on year, and there might be some tweaks, but you never have the time to step back and say, what can we do? Could this be better? And especially that new fan, like, doesn't know all the different options. Yeah, that's right. And I just think that, and the team that work at Port are fantastic. They're so knowledgeable and so smart. They're a really smart group of people. But I think it probably does sometimes just take somebody to say, hey, this isn't my world. And it goes back to like marketing fundamentals. Put yourself in the shoes of the customer. So I think so much focus is put on the customer as existing members, and of course they're so vital to what we do, and retention is absolutely important. But coming from a sort of a two-team town with a smaller population, we need to just build fans. We need as many fans as we can possibly get, so we can get as many members as we can possibly get. So a massive part of that is first-timers. So, it's obvious that we're going to go to kids, and young adults are an emerging audience for us, like the arts. There's lots of similarities in our growth sort of trajectory, but really having a focus on that first time, creating that lifetime value, it's not always the focus, because it's the hard stuff. So it's what I think I was able to do was like, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the first timer. Even how do I what's our SEM look like? How do I find tickets to a game? And it can be slightly confusing. So we might have a AFLW game on one ticketing platform and an AFL game on a different ticketing platform. How does that work with our SEM? It's more complicated than you might kind of think, but until you actually sit down and do it and think, I'm a fan, what's my action going to be? It's not always front of mind. So yeah, I think that's been something that I've been able to sort of bring. And has Port Adelaide as a club, I mean, even by appointing you, hang on, Kristen, where's the sports resume? Like, are they as a club embracing that change and embracing that new knowledge? Because sometimes, change is hard. And when people, oh, that's a new idea. Well, we've always done it this way. How has that been, is Port Adelaide a club that embraces those new ideas and looks for new ways rather than, this is the way we've always done it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the creation of so my role as CMO was brand new to the club. And I remember after sort of speaking to the recruiter, we were just having a bit of conversation about, the value that I could bring and what sort of person the club was looking for.
And she just said to me, look, come and meet the CEO, hear what he has to say, hear about the club's vision. And, I've got to say what started as, I'm not sure if this would be for me, meeting Richo, hearing his vision for the club. And so Richo's actually, Matthew Richardson, is actually from a marketing background himself. So that always helps. And, we had a really great conversation. Obviously, our values really match. His goals match my skill set. So it was a really excellent coming together. And he actually said to me at the time, what is sort of your concerns? What are you thinking here? And I just said, look, I do feel a little bit worried that I don't have that intricate knowledge of the industry. And to Richo's credit, he said to me, I've got enough people here who know about footy. We need something. We need somebody who can bring something different. So absolutely, the club is 100% focused on doing things differently because you just need that for growth, and we're on an absolute growth trajectory. So yeah, it's a great place to be.
That was the piece I was going to ask about the role, because CMOs, like in sport or in clubland, as we like to say them, in Australia, but even in the US, and that are still relatively new for the industry. Like when we're looking at roles across, because sports have previously focused on operation, get the players on the court, get the players on the field, make sure our high performance is working, and then, oh, cool, let's fill the stadium. So it's been ticket and transactional and sort of membership focus, and there really hasn't been people that sort of manage that broader marketing message and that brand message. If you look 25 years ago, there weren't people in those roles. There were, membership people acting up into those roles, but they weren't really doing it. So do you get to have, sport is a weekly roller coaster of, we won last night, we lost last night, we win this week, we've got a big game coming up this week, and there's a bit of, what do we got coming up? Do you get to take a little bit of a longer view and sort of do that with the club to say, hey, we've got to do this year, but the payoff might be 2, 3 years, 10 years down the track? Do you sort of get to have a bit of a longer view in that role?
Absolutely. I think, as well as marketing and media, game day also falls under my remit as well. So in terms of overall customer experience, obviously game day is our shop front, right? It's how we present ourselves to the public and to our fans. So it wouldn't surprise you that Port Adelaide is number one game day experience in the AFL, and it's absolutely our ambition to maintain that number one game day. So looking into the future, we always need to be looking at what our game day needs to bring to our fans to maintain that position. It's sometimes harder to maintain than to get it in the first place. So we're already looking towards 2025 about like what are our sponsor activations going to look like? How are we going to be different? But in terms of like the long-term growth trajectory, because growth is a massive part of my role, where are our new fans coming from? And as I think I touched on before, so kids is a no-brainer. We all have kids strategies, but it's about having that commitment to that kids strategy. So, and I think, Sean, you and I have spoken previously about this. It's a long-term play, and sometimes that can be difficult for organisations to hear that you're not going to see payoff for their strategy for probably 3, 4, 5 years down the track. But it's so important to invest now so we can get that growth at the other end. But in terms of those growth segments, young adults, where we're playing really heavily, or we're getting heavily into the influencer space, certainly through Insta and other social platforms. Trying to reflect modern day Australia through a multicultural strategy is also really important to us. We're based in a highly multicultural area. We have a community arm called Power Community Limited, which does a lot of work in First Nations and also for multicultural audiences as well. So we're able to speak to kids about our brand while giving them an education on really important, societal issues and how sport can help, face those issues. So Long-term, absolutely, but it's also setting the organisation up with the understanding that these gains aren't going to be immediate, but they're absolutely important that we start now and we start hard.
I mean, it is definitely the case of, when should we start building something? It's like it's always yesterday. And so, like, you don't get to see those, you plant that seedling. It's not going to be a tree tomorrow, but if you don't plant that seedling, it doesn't become a tree in 10 years' time. It's very much that piece, but it's, boards and teams are very year-to-year focus. It's really setting that piece up and saying, well, this is what year one looked like. The other piece on that I wanted to ask you, coming in and, being the steward of a really strong brand that is Port Adelaide Footy Club, and and everything that evolves. For those who don't know, it's over 100 years old, founded in 1870. So you've got that history of the club. How do you both manage that, but then also look to freshen it up? It's not the right word, but like be attractive to that younger audience to go and have that balance of here's our history, but also we want it to be attractive and new and on trend. To those new fans?
Look, I think history isn't boring. History is the exciting stuff. Like the rich history of Port is what contributes to generational fandom, right? So we certainly don't let go of that history or downplay it or anything like that. It's absolutely vital to our brand. I think we just use our channel strategy appropriate to the audience. So we will. So I guess an example of bringing our history to a contemporary or a new audience is I won't go into too much history, but what we call the Prison Bar Guernsey, you would know as a Collingwood fan, it was quite controversial. So it was a Guernsey that we wore before joining the AFL back in the day, and it's very meaningful for our fans. And we over the years have made a very strong argument to wear it during showdown against the Adelaide Crows, and last year we did that officially, and so I guess to celebrate that moment, we organised this massive march from Festival Plaza. For anybody who's not familiar with Adelaide, there's this footbridge, and on game day you can just see hordes of fans crossing the bridge. So we had these great big heritage banners that the crowd held up, really just as a nod to our past, but also very much looking towards the future. So I don't think it's one or the other. We absolutely, and we've got a small museum at Alberton as well with the redevelopment, which gets lots of visitors. We've got a little kids space there as well. So it's not one or the other. It's absolutely helping new fans understand our proud history and making it relevant to them.
But it's also that part of you were talking about before, that experience. Like, we'll share in the show notes, the Never Tear Us Apart and integrating an excess theme into your game day. But like adding that walk to Adelaide Oval might be the first time someone comes to a game. It's like, oh, I'm not just going to a game, I'm going to the walk. And then there's the song at the start. Oh, I better make sure I've got my scarf out. And you're just starting to do those storytelling pieces to get them to latch on to the club in some way. And definitely that younger demographic wants that, they are looking for that experience. That potentially is their entry point in, which is what you would have seen, why people will go to the NGV. They want to have an experience. They want to be immersed in what they do. So anything you can add to that experience, again, is great for those new fans.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really not any different to putting on a show. So you're putting on a customer journey that's going to get them to that moment where they get to see their team win at Adelaide Oval. So, even that game day experience is filtered through our sponsor activations. We always work really hard with our sponsors to make sure that they're interactive, they're going to get eyeballs, they're exciting. So, the game day experience doesn't just start and end with the game. It's all the stuff around it that absolutely makes a difference.
And in your time, in the same way that sport has had more commercial partners come into it in the past 30 years, it would have happened the same in the arts, in where you would have had, sponsors sponsoring shows and exhibits at the NGV. Has there been things you're like, oh, this is how we did it at the Arts Centre, or here's how we did it for an exhibition, and then watching what Port Adelaide are doing with some of your current partners? Have you seen, here's things that we can steal of what I've done in my past in the arts that you could apply to with Port Adelaide partners?
I would say the arts could probably learn a bit from sport in that space. My experience in the arts was a bit of make the logo bigger, whereas in sport, sponsors are absolutely they want to integrate so much in a much more I guess sort of tangible way for their future customers and our fans to actually connect with the brand. And I think maybe sometimes in the arts that's a bit more difficult because any kind of activation could potentially be competing with the art or whatever, whereas sport, it feels much more natural. And it's just part of, certainly the game day activations, it's just part of the fun. It just adds to the atmosphere. And if sponsors can get some great traction out of that, then that's better for them, better for us, and better for the fan.
And as you talked about Matthew, I'm not going to call him Richo because I don't know him that well as a CEO. He said there's a lot of people in your team that know footy and know things like game day. How has it been coming in, looking at things like game day, and your experience is in the experience side of things, but then looking at your digital team and what they're doing and how they're covering a game day. How much of one you learnt from them, but then also given them some strategy and some tweaks to serve some of your longer term goals?
The team are just they're really so fantastic, and they certainly our head of game day and events. I'll just give Cara a bit of a shout out. So Cara came from a production background, so she has always been very intimately understanding what it takes to put on a great show. So I've learnt a lot from Cara, actually, just around the specificity of timing around a game day. Absolutely, that all of that is important in the arts, but not to like broadcast level. So I've learnt a lot about what makes good broadcast, and in terms of what I've been able to bring, I think just really, again, I think going back to having a bit of a consideration of a first-time visitor. So how do I make this journey to the gate a bit easier? If I have kids, how do I entertain them if they're not going to sit through a whole game? How do I sort of steer people to our kids' zone? Just things like that, I think, is been something that I have tried to contribute, but mostly I've learnt from the experts. I mean, these guys have been obviously number one in AFL game days for longer than I've been there. So absolutely, I've learnt a lot.
I mean, and that is also part of like with AFL having such a membership focus, a big portion of the people who are turning up to Adelaide Oval are people who are members who go to the same spot, go to the same, go to their seats because they know where they are. And so, someone who is new, you sometimes, if you're working in the business, you forget, 10, 15, 20% of that people turning up are turning up for the first time. They don't know where to go. And we see stadiums do that when they host something that they don't normally host, and everyone's coming for the first time and experience that venue for the first time. But yeah, it is something that you do want to get right, because that that first time can lock them in.
That's right, absolutely. And as well as in stadium, we always make sure that we give people a bit of a show on arrival. So we'll have drummers and flag wavers and lots of mini activations on the Southern Plaza at Adelaide Oval, just to make sure that people know, obviously, that they've arrived at the right place. but also we'll have our membership team who people can ask any questions of. There are lots of, game day people to help assist people where to go. And I will just sort of touch on something that I thought was really special certainly in my first joining the club. We have a member recognition round, and in every marketing job I've ever had, I've really tried to, where I can, get to know the fan at a one-on-one level. So in the arts, I would work a front of house shift every now and then and things like that. So for our member recognition round, we gave away flags, and that was my opportunity to get down on the ground and give away flags to members. So that was members and fans. So it was a really great opportunity to just have a chat. Like, is this your first time at the footy? Tell me about it. Like, how does it feel? Do you know where you're going? How can I help you? And I know that's only like a poll of one, but doing that sort of stuff is absolutely important to understand the fan experience and how we can continue to improve it.
I think that's really good. I mean, because we all work in, audience personas, and we get big data and we boil it down and say, this is the family and and it's like, you still want to put some faces to, I've chatted to that person. They are actually in that persona. And we have got 60, 70% of that right. And so you sort of, and so it's good as a marketer, but it's also good for, your digital staff and your marketers and your membership staff to know, who am I talking to? Which, and, getting some of those personal stories. We focus a lot on the stadium and the ground and the experience, because it is a great experience at a Port Adelaide home game. Where are you taking Port Adelaide outside the stadium to potentially either talk to your fans outside the stadium or reach new fans?
Yeah, so I think, as I said before, growth is obviously really high on my agenda, and a big part of that fan growth is through our social channels. Anybody who doesn't follow us, I encourage you to do so. We've got an incredibly talented team who do our digital and our socials and our media team as well, obviously. So in terms of content creation, the team are always looking for obviously aligning with the culture. It makes a really big difference. And when I say that, I saw a really great example the other week during the Met Gala, which footy fans wouldn't necessarily follow, but anybody who's, on social media would see that the Met Gala has lots of, amazing costumes and things like that. The team put together this really sort of kooky, Met Gala in the shape of different AFL teams. It's hard to describe, but it was just very clever, and it said to me that they've really got their finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening in popular culture. And it's just making sport relevant again to more people. So we know that the team know how to speak to the fans. That's why the fans engage with us, and we know when to post heavy sports content and all the stats, because that's what the fans want, and we'll continue to deliver that. But really, where I think the team is taking things in a really exciting direction is, how do we, again, tap into that non-hardcore fan, just to bring them into our circle a little bit more, to tell them that, hey, we're relevant, we understand what's happening in your lives, what you're reading about, what you're seeing, and this is just a fun way to engage with us. And as I think I touched on before, we're doing more and more with influencers and how to again engage them with our brand. So social channels are a really big play for us in terms of broadening that fanscape. But also we have a dedicated role in media, in publicity and PR, who concentrates on non-footy media. So how do we get into conversations with lifestyle publications, with podcasts that might not normally touch on sport? How do we showcase the personalities of our players, both AFL and AFLW, to make sport more relevant in people's lives? So that's really our focus on growing fandom really through socials, really important, but also expanding beyond footy media is important to us as well.
I think that piece of that, like surprise and delight and turning up in unexpected places, whether it be online, on a influencer podcast or influencer channels, which you don't think, oh, hang on, they're not footy, or, physical events where you're like, well, what's the Port Adelaide Footy Club doing over here? Just one, you'll most likely find Port Adelaide fans at that event or on those channels, and it further connects them. But then also, it is that, again, another entry point for a fan to, engage, figure out if they want to engage, where they want to come to an event. I think that's, a really exciting space. But again, it's sort of like we were talking about before. It's not the footy, it's not the normal standard footy, content or initiative. Is that something that's, again, one of those you're putting the fishing line in and seeing what nibbles are coming through and testing those different strategies?
Yeah, well, I think another example, and sorry, this is another arts example, but I sort of feel like it's a nice synergy for how arts and sports can absolutely be relevant to the same people. Adelaide Festival comes to Adelaide every year around March, and it's a really big tourism draw card for the state. They get lots of great numbers and a highly engaged audience. So it just so happened that Adelaide Festival this year, what they wanted to do was bring out this big puppet, which was representative of a young Syrian refugee girl who was weirdly, she was called Lil Amal, even though she was massive. So if you can imagine a really big puppet, so it's a piece of public art essentially, and she moves about and she interacts with people. So we worked with Adelaide Festival to help introduce this puppet character to our fans, and the way we did that was we used the work that we do through Power Community Limited, certainly in schools. So because she was representative of the Syrian refugee, we got her out into one of our multicultural Power Cup schools to, kick the ball with the kids and things like that. And you can imagine in the sense that gave the kids a great thrill, but you can imagine the content that came out of something like that. This massive puppet kicking a footy with these young kids. And then we had a little Amal come along to a game day. So I was talking before about that walk across the footbridge to Adelaide Oval. If you can imagine this massive puppet and all these Port fans surrounding her. She also happened to be wearing a Port Adelaide Football Club scarf, by the way, so we made sure that we got the brand in that way. And the interaction with our fans, the spectacle of it. So great content for us. It was amplified through Adelaide Festival's channels as well as our own. Because it made for such great vision, we got a fair bit of national coverage out of it. So that's just really taking a big event, a big spectacle that's already happening in Adelaide, bringing it to our game, mushing them together to say, hey, this is all about community, togetherness. Both of these things can exist at the same time, and just gave more exposure to our brand, perhaps to people who wouldn't normally consider Port Adelaide in their thinking space. So yeah, I think that was just another example of using big events to amplify our brand.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there is opportunities for more crossover. And then the other festival I want to ask you about is the Festival of Footy that is Gather Round that has come to Adelaide now twice. And for those who don't know, the AFL brings the whole league into Adelaide for a week, and all the teams play there. Obviously, for you, it's a home game, and it's everybody in the footy world coming. How do you as a club both engage Gather Round as a concept, but then also maximise the opportunities for Port Adelaide in what is now a big, footy festival.
Gather Round has been just an incredible opportunity for, I think, more interstate fans to see how we do what we do, which it's just really an opportunity to expose more people to our game day, which is just going to continue to feed fandom. But of course, the AFL put on what they actually call the Festival of Footy in Elder Park, where they have all these activations, mostly sponsor activations, but each club gets their time to shine, be it player interviews on the stage or activating this little cube. So this year we did what we sometimes do in our kids zone, which is a teal light disco for the kids in our activation cube. And the relevance of teal is obviously that's our brand colour, but that was really popular. It's just a chance for kids of all club fandom. We let other club kids come in as well, and it's just really another touch point for communicating with new fans, potentially fans that we can convert. Painting their faces on a home game, whether or not they went for Port or not. Like, kids love that, right? So we had potentially Essendon fans with Port stripes because kids just love to be engaged in that sort of thing. So I think Gather Round's just another great opportunity to showcase what we do and what Adelaide does, and get more fans exposed to our brand.
Yeah, and I guess, one of the main features, and that's obviously why the government keeps supporting it, it does, give you a real strong pivot point, to do some great things with your hospitality partners, when the spotlight is on Adelaide, gets you to create extra premium events around it. So, the pride of everyone in Adelaide to show it off, but also for you and your partners.
That's right.
So you're, like you said, you're 15 months into the role?
About that, yeah.
What does that longer term vision look like? Where do you want to see the power in 5 or so years' time? Seeing some of these seedlings that you're putting in now coming sprouting through.
Yeah. Well, the club as a whole obviously has a strategic vision, and it wouldn't surprise any club out there that our goal is to win premierships. But a lot of things need to happen to make that happen, and certainly one of the many things that needs to happen is growth in fans and growth in membership. So we've got a goal of 100,000 members. As soon as we can get there is going to be great. So that's absolutely a goal that I've been set. And as I said before, in order to get there, we need to grow the base. So we need to grow the top of the funnel. So absolutely, that's a big strategic goal. Brand is a goal. Like I think we. Being a South Australian team, we might suffer a little bit from brand awareness. So we're doing a lot of, certainly outside of SA, obviously. So we're doing what we can to, as I said, get into publications, because we don't necessarily have the budget to advertise brand. So we're doing it in much cleverer ways through our socials and through media exposure where we can really leverage that. So that's a big thing. And it sounds kind of obvious, but culture, like internal culture, team culture, it's so important that if we're going to reach these really ambitious growth targets, we need a really strong, dedicated, enthusiastic, passionate team behind us to do that. And I feel really privileged to have that team, but it's just about really maintaining that enthusiasm and maintaining the hunger, I suppose, to keep us there.
I think so. Like I said, your appointment in itself was new, and that, I guess, openness to new ideas is a really good culture setter, and you want to see that grow and have people, be able to come up with a great idea and then have the team be able to execute it. Like that's, to me, the key part if you're going to be tackling down big goals. I mean, the Australian sports market does set a very high bar. I'm sure there's, there's people listening in the US going, 100,000 season ticket holders, members is a ridiculous number per capita, but that's just what the sports landscape is in Australia, and that's where the bar is set.
Yep, yeah, that's right.
So, Kristen, I really appreciate you coming on. I want to get to the Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I vaguely remember. So my older brother is quite a bit older than me, and I have this very vague memory of he was an amateur boxer. So I have this vague memory of going to one of his bouts, and I must have been quite young because I remember it being quite traumatic. I think he wasn't very good. So I potentially remember my brother being sort of beaten up, but that's a terrible example. But what I might do is actually I'll give you an example of probably my when I first moved to Melbourne, of course, coming from Queensland, we were absolutely about, rugby league. And so AFL was still fairly new to me when I moved to Melbourne. And really my first introduction to AFL came through Community Cup. I don't know if it even still happens, but yep. Community Cup in Melbourne for me was absolutely the opportunity to get together with all your mates and like-minded people. Kids would do, kick to kick on at halftime. And it was just such an amazing community event. Again, I feel like I've talked about it a lot, but really just bringing community and sport together. So that was a really, really wonderful introduction to AFL for me.
You would have been to a lot of sports events now. Do you have a favourite food at a sports event or a go-to food?
I do. It's really daggy and probably pretty obvious, but hot chips and chicken salt.
Hot chips and chicken salt. Well, this is the thing. For people who don't know, South Australia is pretty much cornered the market in Australia for chicken salt. So, there's chicken salt and then there's chicken salt from South Australia. So I can completely understand that. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Oh, I think besides the obvious sort of calendar to look at my day, I'm really big on Audible. So I try to, I run every morning, not very far, but it's just it sets me up for the day. It's great for the headspace and things like that. So as a bit of a bribe to myself, I do audiobooks when I run. So I try to get really compelling books. So I get to listen to my book if I get on this run. So yeah, Audible. Mick Herron's Slow Horses series. I don't know if anybody's watched the streaming on TV, but it's excellent.
Well, there you go. I was going to ask that. Is there someone that the listeners should follow and why? It might be an Audible author, or it might be someone else that you follow for resources or inspiration.
Yeah, I quite a few years ago at a ticketing conference, I heard the economist Saul Eslake speak. And for those of you who don't know Saul, he's an Australian economist, and he just has this really great ability to, I guess, synthesize quite complex economic issues into real speak, and how it changes in the economy affect us all. So I follow Saul through LinkedIn, and he's always entertaining. He's not a dry economist at all. He's really really interesting guy.
Terrific. And lastly, and you can answer this personally, and then you can put your Port Adelaide CMO hat on. Which social media platform is your MVP?
I feel slightly embarrassed to say this, but I think the TikTok algorithm has penetrated my brain. I'm pretty addicted to it.
I don't think you'll be the only person that said that. So I think that's completely fine.
So personally, probably TikTok. In terms of how we use TikTok at the club, look, it's a little bit volatile, that space at the moment. For those who don't know, that certainly, it's great to reach young fans, but the South Australian government is making a bit of noise around potentially banning social media for under 14s. So that's a space for us to to really be aware of and a bit of a watch out. But in terms of for Port, I think Insta for us and really for that growth audience makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I think you're not the only one doing the watch and wait with TikTok. I mean, because it's not only the South Australian government. There's lots of governments that are flagging things. Whether they actually change anything, I don't know. But it is one that sort of we're all in wait and watch sort of mode.
Yeah.
We will put links to the Port Adelaide's socials in the show notes so people can follow those accounts. But what platform is a good way for podcast listeners to reach out and say, Kristen, I really appreciate you being on the podcast?
Probably LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yep.
Just search me on LinkedIn and I'll be pretty easy to find. I'd love to hear from people.
I do appreciate catching up on the podcast, and great to see you in sport. I guess you probably had the same question when someone said, do you want to come across, as when I had the initial conversation, hey, do you want to come and speak at an arts conference? And like, I always say yes, but it still is a little bit of, left of centre, which can shake people up. And I think sport needs more of it. And that's why I wanted to catch up with you, because those new perspectives, on the industry and things like conversion and new fans, are definitely needed from a growth point of view. So thanks for coming on the podcast, and look forward to catching up sometime soon.
Thanks, Sean.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekHQ.com/pickmybrain.
Thanks again to Kristen. I will put links to Kristen's LinkedIn in the show notes. You can find them at sportsgeekhq.com/379. I'll also be tagging Kristen on the post that I do on LinkedIn. So please, if you haven't connected with me, please do so. Let me know in the note that you are listening to the podcast. We'll also have links to all the things Port Adelaide Footy Club in the show notes, including some vision, if we can find it, of their amazing game day experience, and especially that Never Tear Us Apart opening. If you get a chance to check it out, please do. It is goosebumps kind of stuff, the way that they introduce their game, and it's a big part of their game experience. So thanks, Kristen, for coming onto the podcast. Before I finish up this episode, I just want to replay a Sports Geek classic from one that I have used on stage previously, but came up in conversation recently in talking about what I call my Spice Girl strategy, which is finding out, are your partners happy? Are they happy with what you deliver? And I'm not just talking about the area that we excel in, which is digital, but is it digital? Is it event? Is it a media piece? Is it hospitality? Are they getting access to the right talent? Like, there's lots of pieces of the puzzle that you can offer your partners, your commercial partners, and if you're not using the Spice Girls strategy, you may miss the mark. Now, I realise this. The Spice Girls, released their first single in 1996. This is getting to be a dated reference, but thankfully, the Spice Girls are still well recognised, and this is a well-known song. And so the Spice Girl strategy is asking your partners, what do they want? What do they really, really want? And why the double really? Because normally, the first time, they don't normally give you the right answer. I could be more polite and say they give you the wrong answer. And so asking them really, really is really important. And if I can see how many times I can put really into this piece. Because normally they don't give you the right answer straight up. So they'll say, oh, yeah, we want brand awareness. It's great. We want to be associated with you. Yeah, that'd be terrific. And then in the season, they say, hey, we didn't get many new customers. And it's like, well, that's not brand awareness, guys. That's conversion. And so one of the things is, digging down, asking the double really to try to get that answer out of them. Are they more focused on conversion, or do they want to get people to their events? What are the things that they really want to do? Because then you can actually shape your digital, your experiences, the talent that you're bringing in to serve that goal. But then the other thing, I think, sports digital people who are producing the content, or the commercial folk that are helping sell your club and what you can offer, you should be looking at how they're going about marketing themselves. What are they doing on their socials? What events are they running? How are they pushing out their services? So put your marketing hat on and look at what they're doing on their channels. What's working for them? What's not working? How can your club help that sponsor. And so that type of thing starts unpacking a bunch of opportunities. And that's pretty much what Digital Dollars is, helping your team deliver on something that the sponsors actually want, which drives revenue because the sponsors come on board, they renew, they see uplift. And so that's what it is. And that's what the Spice Girl strategy is, asking your sponsor what they really, really want and then delivering on that, and not just doing that box ticking exercise that sometimes can happen. Hey, we sold a sponsorship. Cool. We're going to do 6 pieces and we're going to put the logo in the corner. Great. Like, that does do the job. But if you've been in those awkward conversations where they say, oh, well, it didn't really do the job and we just sort of followed the list, it normally comes down to that initial meeting, not knowing what they want. That's it for this week. Thanks again to Kristen for coming on the podcast. Links at sportsgeekhq.com/379. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Do you get Sports Geek news? Sean Callanan analyzes the latest sports business articles for you weekly. Sign up at sportsgeekhq.com. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.